Good afternoon, and welcome to Assuring Your Digital Transformation with Identity Governance and Administration Health Systems CIO Media Inc. production, sponsored by Imprivata. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. My name is Anthony Guerra. I'm the Editor-in-Chief of Health Systems CIO, and I will be your moderator today. We're looking forward to your participation. You can send in your questions or comments as they occur to you, and we'll take them later in the program. Just so you see how we're going to, first, a nice way to view the screen, click in the top center, get it in side-by-side mode. You can adjust the divider to get the slides and the video boxes the size you want, and it should say speaker view in the top right-hand corner. Just so you see how we're going to spend our time today, we're going to go about 35 minutes with our main panel discussion featuring Randy Nale, Healthcare Technology Solution Strategist with Microsoft, and our good friend Wes Wright, CTO with Imprivata, and then we'll have our Q&A. So let's jump right into it. Very interesting topic today. We want to make sure we answer all the questions that are out there in the audience, so I want you to take advantage of that questions opportunity. But let's get started. Randy, you want to give us an overview of your role? I think people know Microsoft, but maybe you do want to give a little color around what they're doing in this space.
Yeah, thank you for that. So my role is I lead our healthcare technology platform initiatives for our U.S. healthcare customers. So essentially working with, the largest enterprise healthcare delivery organizations, healthcare solution companies, that sort of thing, to build out healthcare solutions on the Microsoft cloud. And that includes, relevant to today, that includes the identity and access and other security, privacy, and compliance features, functions, and capabilities necessary to use those cloud platforms and the solutions built on them for healthcare data and healthcare use cases.
All right, very good. Wes?
Hi. Thanks for having me again, Anthony. Randy, great to be on another Health System CIO webinar with you. Wes Wright, I am the Chief Technology Officer at Imprivata. Been at Imprivata about 2.5 years now. Prior to that, I have 25 years on the health delivery organization side, various CIO and CTO roles there. And really, my job at Imprivata is really to bring that customer focus. Gus Melez is our CEO, who's been there about 4 years now. Really wants the customer focus to be front and center at Imprivata. What is going to help our customer, which is usually the health IT folks. What is going to help our customers help their customers, the clinicians, the providers. Deliver care in the most efficient way possible. So that's why Gus brought me on board, is one, to bring that into focus, more into focus than it was, and two, I kind of try and look over the horizon a little bit and talk to people like Randy about what's happening with identity and access management, not just in healthcare but in general, and try to do the old, what's his name, the hockey guy, skate to where the puck is. Give me a little help there. There we go. Yeah. Try to get to where the puck is instead of where it was. That's also what I do. And then start to play a little bit in the mergers and acquisition side to identify some good enhancements or tangential things that Imprivata can do to go back to that original goal, which was to make to help our customers make technology as transparent as possible to their customers.
Very good. All right, Wes, let's stick with you. Talk about the digital transformation you see as a result of the pandemic. What are some of your observations, things that have impressed you, things that have been done out there?
Yeah, there's a couple of different, just like healthcare. There's the healthcare, the practice side of the house, and then there's my old side of the house, which is the healthcare IT delivery side of the house. And of course, on the practice side of the house, the thing that we saw was the incredible increase in virtual health or telehealth or whatever kind of health you want to call non-in-person healthcare delivery. You know, I think Randy probably has this number, but I remember at the beginning of COVID, at some point I heard something like, Teams usage had gone up 3,000% in a week or some such thing like that. And when that happened, we got a lot of the clinicians that used to say, hey, I'll do telehealth when you pry my stethoscope from my cold dead hands, and then they were forced to do virtual care and forced to do that, and they went, hey, this ain't too bad after all. They probably didn't say ain't because they're a lot more educated than I am. This isn't too bad after all. And now, we've seen the telehealth rates come way back down, somewhere in the 20s, I would imagine. But those places where it's most appropriate, so say like in a bundled surgery program where a patient had to drive into the hospital and burn 2 hours in their day to have somebody do a wound check. Well, now they can do that using virtual health. So I think that's great. That's what I saw on the delivery side of the house, and then or on the patient care side of the house, and then on the delivery side of the house, we saw not that we didn't on the patient care side, but we saw quite a bit of heroics. Really, there were health IT organizations that at one time they had 10% of their workforce work remote, maybe 10%, and they didn't work remote all the time. And then all of a sudden, from day one to day two, 80% of their workforce is clamoring to work remote, and the heroics, the hoops that both the Chief Information Security Officer's office, the CIO's office, all those folks went through to enable that capability, that work from home capability, was just something that I think the health IT community should be and should continue to be proud of.
Randy, what were your observations?
Yeah, first of all, I would agree with everything that Wes just walked through there. So whether it's the, great increase in telehealth, virtual visits, and virtual consults, virtual rounding, all sorts of, technology being used to engage and enable healthcare delivery. We saw a ton of that. I was talking to one of our customers last week, and I think they told me they've done 1.2 million virtual visits, but since I want to say they said June or something like that. Whatever. I don't remember the exact time frame, but 1.2. The 1.2 sticks out in my head. I was pretty surprised by that. It's just one. It's just one organization that had ramped up to that. The other thing though that I would add to what Wes said is the acceleration of what a lot of folks refer to as the consumerization of healthcare delivery. And that is, now that there's this recognition that healthcare can be digitally enabled and even partially delivered in a digital way, this expectation that was starting to happen has accelerated. And the expectation is around, if I want to go on a vacation to, the Maldives, I can get on my cell phone and I can pretty much have that wrapped up in about 30 minutes. And, I have my flight, I have my hotel, I have, somebody to help me get there. I can look up, things to do while I'm there, all of that sort of thing. Contrast that with the experience that folks have with healthcare today, where I call, a phone number. I might get the person that I need. I might not. They may transfer me to somewhere else. I may have to get on a way. I mean, it's the experiences couldn't be more different. And so there's this real focus by our healthcare provider customers on enabling this consumer digital experience where when I get to the ER or to the urgent care clinic, I'm already in line and they already know who I am, and I've already pre-filled out the paperwork. And, before I even, leave to go back home, the device that I need to help me do my therapy is already on its way to my house. And, those kinds of digitally enabled experiences. And, the pandemic has really accelerated, our customers' investment in that and their customers' expectation around those digital experiences. And, I think you see maybe the same thing in education and other industries, but, given the disparity between consumer experience and other industries and what we've had traditionally in healthcare, I think, we had so much ground to make up that, it's become a critical focus for our healthcare provider organizations.
Wes, the drop back down, that we've seen from that virtual engagement, you attribute that to, and I'm not up on the latest policy developments in terms of the reimbursement, what's being reimbursed, what's been extended, what hasn't. But so if you go by the theory that, healthcare, you talk about the healthcare IT heroics, you say to yourself, and it makes me think, from a CIO point of view, a lot of them are probably saying, look, we could have done this all along, but there was a lot of bureaucracy. There was always a lot of red tape. There was everyone wanted to move real slowly, but we could have always done this because look, we did it. So the patients took care that way because they had to. The providers delivered care that way because they had to. The money was there because the government made the changes. But what do you think about everything sinking back to the way it was? Why does that happen? And does it have to happen? Should it happen, or should it not happen?
I mean, you said it, Anthony. It's always and probably always will be. It's the follow the money. They're at the height of the emergency order declaration. The telehealth visit was paid exactly as much as if that visit was conducted in person, and so there was no disincentive for folks to do it. There's probably a 30 to 40% disparity, if not more, in the normal payments for the telehealth visits. I actually think it's more than that now that I think about it. And so there was a disincentive. I mean, you had to really be like in an ACO or a really good managed care organization, like a Kaiser or something like that, that got the benefit back from that telehealth visit, eventually, in order for you to really just go full force into telehealth. When they started paying, then when we got to parity, the providers, of course, it's, if I can stay at my home and do double the number of visits and essentially get double the pay and not have to go into the hospital and so on and so forth, of course they're going to do it. When the Blue Crosses and the insurance companies started to go, wait a minute, you don't have any overhead anymore. That hospital overhead that we were paying you or are paying you, or the ambulatory clinic overhead that we're paying you for that inpatient visit, you don't have that overhead because you're at your house. So we're not going to pay you the same rate as what we were doing. I think personally, this is just a Wes Wright, not an Imprivata opinion. I think personally, the telehealth rate is a little too low. I can understand it shouldn't be parity because, again, there isn't that overhead there. But, we need to find I think we need to, a U.S. healthcare organization, need to find this parity point to where if we can get, I don't know, maybe 50% of the visits in telehealth, to where it makes financial sense, not just for the provider, but for the provider's organization, then we'll get that. We'll see that, we went up 80% and then we dive back down to 10 to 15%. And I'd like to see us, start getting back up there around the 30 to 50% if we possibly could. But that's not going to happen if we don't start paying a little bit more for that telehealth visit, I think.
Right. All right. That's very interesting. We'll keep an eye on how that evolves. Randy, let's start with you on this question. Why is identity governance and administration so important to successful digital transformation?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that are pretty obvious, right? So, as you begin to enable more digital experiences for the patient, for the caregiver, for the specialist, for the home health nurse, for the long-term care therapist, for the the dispatcher at the home health, that's, there's just more and more people involved in the digital experience. And so therefore they need an identity to participate there so that you can make sure that they're doing the right things, that they don't have access to information that they shouldn't have access to, that they do have access to the systems that they need to do their job. And so, there's just more and more identities. And of course, with more identities comes more churn. With more digital experiences comes more digital applications. And so there's just, I think it's pretty obvious there's aggregately more systems, people, and all of that you have, the more you digitize. And so therefore, these, IT and information security organizations that make sure all of those things are appropriate, right? Folks have the access they need to do their job. They don't have access to the things that they shouldn't, that malicious actors aren't there. Those folks need tools in order to be able to do that, right? They're not going to get more headcount. As a matter of fact, it's probably going the other way. They're not. The number of bad actors that are trying to get at this private information and just cause havoc. Those things are not getting less; they're getting more. All of that, and so having a complete and highly automated and highly secure and highly capable identity governance solution is, I think, a prerequisite to digital transformation. If you think about the way virtual visits are held today, or at least the way that they were sort of ramped up during the height of the pandemic, the first sort of surge of the pandemic. We're still at the height of the pandemic, but the first surge, the way that those things were done is patients came in almost as anonymous users. So we're in this teleconference here, and when I joined, I just put in some number that was sent to me via email to say that I was a participant. Well, that's the way virtual visits kind of happened, and in many cases still happen, right? You just get this number, you type in. Well, how do I know that that's me? Well, I got to hold up my driver's license and let the person look at it, or, one of those things. Well, that's just really not good enough, especially as more and more of this stuff gets automated, right? So I mentioned earlier that by the time the doctor comes in, I want to have already gathered, maybe some insurance information, or maybe done a COVID symptom check or something like that in an automated way, so that the nurse or the doctor doesn't have to spend their time, doing that. Well, I can't use the driver's license then. I've got to know that I have the right person before, the doctor or the nurse even joins in. And so all of that means that inpatient needs an identity. And so there you go then. There's more people who need an identity and need to be validated and verified. And so, keeping track of all that is really the role of identity governance. And as I mentioned, as we do more and more of that, and it becomes critical to these digital experiences and the safety and security of the data that they create, you have to have that identity governance, capability in place in a sophisticated and automated way, right? And I know that's sort of the root of what our talk today is about, and I think you all shared the Gartner report that essentially said the same thing, and couldn't agree more.
Yeah, if we can get that link sent out. Oh, we did. No, we didn't. We'll send it out. If we can get that link sent out in the chat box to the Gartner paper, that'd be great. Wes, you've been talking about this for a while. Identity governance, it's the new control plane.
Yep.
Is it a question of convincing people that an old way is no longer sufficient? Is it accepted sort of as common sense now that identity governance is the way to go about it, or one of the key ways to go about security? Or is it really just a question of how? Are we beyond whether or not identity governance is a key tool, and now it's just a question of how you go about implementing it?
Man, that's a fantastic question, Anthony.
Not bad, huh?
Yeah, no.
Don't ask me to repeat it. I'll never remember it.
I was just, I hate to say it, but I'm a little bit surprised. It was that good a question.
Very good. Very good.
It's a little bit of all that. It really is. So it used to be back in the day that an ID was something that we used we would just pass them out like candy, because you needed an ID to get your exchange online or your email, or hell, at that time it was banyan vines, that kind of stuff. So we'd give you an ID, a user ID, and that's the way we thought about it. We didn't think of it as a digital identity, and we have been doing IT stuff like that for 10 or 15 years, and it's just been here's a user ID. It's not a digital ID. It's not you, like Randy said. It's not you. It's just a one of your not thousands, probably one of your 10 or 20 user IDs that you have. And so we've been disingenuous with our users, and I don't like to call them users, but let's do that, by just handing those user IDs out like candy, and not emphasizing how important that digital identity is to controlling everything. I've done the slide that says digital identity is the heart of everything. Your users and locations and your applications and your device. It really is at the heart of everything. And we haven't trained our end users that how important that digital identity is. And even worse, we haven't trained our health IT technologists how important that digital identity is. I think way back at the beginning of the session, one of the things that has sprang to light in COVID is exactly how important that digital ID is. As we have the joiners, movers, and leavers. You move the ambulatory nurse to the COVID ward and then back over to the ED, and he's got all these extra entitlements all of a sudden. And then when it goes back to his normal job, what are you going to do with that stuff? We've had this conversation before, Anthony.
Yep.
So now it's been brought to light. My folks ask me, what is digital? Hey, if you're going to buy a house, if you're going to build a house, you're going to put plumbing in it, right? Yeah. Of course, I'm going to put plumbing.
Ideally.
Ideally. That's what digital identity is. It's plumbing. It's something that is that essential to a great health IT operation. But it's not fancy. It doesn't. There's no fireworks and stuff that go off from your clinicians when the toilet flushes. It's an expected thing. And so it's been kicked down the road. And now that's why I love Barry's paper, the Gartner paper that Kate put out there for us, is that he's associating, look, you can't do digital transformation, or you can't build a house unless you have a good identity governance administration. Well, you can build a house, but then you're going to have some, an outhouse, and there ain't going to be any water in your house. So if you want to do a modern house, you've got to have plumbing. If you want to do digital transformation, because digital identity touches everything in digital transformation, you have to do a good identity governance and administration. You just can't kick that can down the road any longer. So that I couldn't agree with Barry's paper anymore.
Do you think this is widely understood, Wes, among CISOs? Is this totally accepted common knowledge at this point, or is there resistance?
Wow, another good question, Anthony. And
that's two in a row, buddy.
That's two in a row. You are on a roll, and I'm really going to be anxious to hear what Randy says about this one too. I still think to some degree it's a can that people think they can kick down the road. I talk to folks and they go, well, that's pretty pricey just for managing digital IDs. And I go, wait a minute, not just for, I just walked you through this whole slide thing that showed you exactly how important digital identity is. As a matter of fact, I saw your head nodding when I said digital identity is the new control plane. And now we get to here and you go, well, that's a lot of money just for digital. It's your whole shooting match. It's how things, how you control everything. So I think it's better than it was pre-COVID, way, way better. But I still think that there are some CISOs and CIOs and CTOs, and where it falls is changing back and forth, of course. But I still think there's some of those folks that are playing kick the can out there still, getting it on down the road. I'll get to it next year's budget.
Randy, this is really interesting. What are your thoughts on that? Is it shocking that people are kicking this down the road to you? Do you see people kicking it down the road?
I more or less agree with what Wes said. Maybe articulate it just a little different. So I think that, any sort of information security professional understands that identity governance is absolutely required. I think where folks haven't maybe gotten their head wrapped around is the absolute need for automation of that. There's a lot of folks who still do all of that in a very manual way, right? So if I need to get access to something else, or somebody leaves, or I need, to identify a patient, I walked through a minute ago holding up the driver's license. I think, there are maybe not a lot, but I think there are certainly BDMs and TDMs, so business decision makers and technical decision makers in the healthcare industry that believe manual and doing an okay job at this is good enough. And so therefore they're kicking that, can down the road, as Wes mentioned. But, if we take something like what's going on right now around the COVID-19 vaccines even, I mean, if you're a healthcare worker and you're going to go, practice medicine, deliver care, sometime after a few months from now, the question is going to be asked, have you had the COVID vaccine? And if not, we're not going to let you practice medicine, in our facility or whatever. Well, if you think about that, I need to identify who you are and whether or not you have the vaccine or not. So that's a form of digital identity, right? And so you can imagine that now, if I had a very sophisticated and a very complete and a very automated digital identity system, then having the COVID vaccine or not could simply be an attribute or a piece of data that I could get to once I, validate that person's identity. And I think, if I just sort of use that example there, I think there's a lot of people would say, yeah, we don't need all that. We'll just print it out, put it in the HR or put it in our employee health system, and then, manually have somebody manually match all that up, or make a photocopy of it, or God forbid, fax it, from wherever the vaccine was done, right? And that's sort of good enough, right? And as again, I'll say it again, as we digitize more and more of this, and technology begins to fill more and more of the, sort of in between spaces, and there's more of this hybrid delivery of care. That sort of manual process is just not going to be good enough, right? It's just not going to be good enough. And so I think, the can kickers are going to regret their decisions at some point, right? It's like the last folks that held out on virtualizing their servers in their data center, right? Yeah. They regretted that decision. They're like, oh my God, I can't believe I still have thousands of physical servers in my data center. And, my competitors or my the folks across the street are able to do so much more and at so much less cost and so much more efficiently because they virtualized, 5 years ago. And so I think the can kickers are going to regret that decision, before too long in a similar way.
And I like that. I like that phraseology there, Randy. The can kicker, and we see them doing it on cloud too. And those folks, when COVID came along, they really regretted kicking that can down the road. I'll tell you.
Well, when they read that, if they haven't already, Wes, when they read that press release that's out today around, Amazon maybe getting into the primary care space, they're going to go, man, we really should have thought about that cloud stuff a little harder.
Well, let me pretend to be a can kicker here. Okay. So now I think we've defined the issue as everyone gets that managing digital identity is very important. That's what Randy was saying. Makes sense. But the can kickers are saying, I can survive with my manual approach right now. I don't have or I don't want to spend the money on this right now because I've got other things I need or want to spend money on. Mm-hmm. And I would imagine your retort, Wes, based on the plumbing analogy, is you are making an unwise decision in terms of what you're deciding to kick down the road. This is so important and so critical, and I'm guessing you would say so unmanageable in a manual way that you're making a very dangerous decision. Do I have that right? Yeah.
Or to take the analogy to its inevitable conclusion. They are building. They are building an outhouse.
I'm scared too, Anthony.
I didn't know how much we were going to get into the weeds here on the plumbing, but go ahead, Wes.
But yeah, they're okay with having an outhouse when the rest of society has moved into indoor plumbing. I'm okay with this outhouse. That's what we can do. I'm okay with the outhouse and the well, and we'll just bring the water in as we. That's where they're at. And we also, I think probably August, maybe July, somewhere around there, Imprivata released the Imprivata Digital Identity Framework for healthcare. And I think those can kickers, when they think IGA, they're simply thinking provisioning and deprovisioning. And they're not looking at all the things. I mean, in that digital identity framework, I think there's either 32 or 33 capabilities that really fall in identity governance and administration. And they're thinking about, okay, yeah, I've got the, Joe Bag of Donuts is sitting there. He gets a spreadsheet and he types in some stuff and then he builds an account for, Nurse Joe. That's what the can kicker's thinking. And if we can get in front of them and say, look, it's not just provisioning and deprovisioning. One, it has to be automated. I mean, if there's anything that begs for automation in healthcare IT, it's the provisioning and deprovisioning of digital identities. But there's so many, that's 2 of the 30. Actually, that's only one box of the 32 capabilities that a digital identity framework, that a good identity governance and administration program needs to make the technology transparent to that clinician or to that business partner. Your outhouse works okay, and you're bringing it in the water from the well works okay, but go to your neighbor's house where they have indoor plumbing and turn on the faucet and that kind of stuff, and that's what you're missing out on.
All right, let me ask you, just give me a ballpark answer. What percentage of health systems out there do you think have a system that sort of hits all 32 boxes? what percentage out there are totally, they're flying high? They're all set. They got the best indoor plumbing you've ever seen.
Yeah, 5 to 10.
Really? So there's a lot of room. Randy, what do you think about that? You see a lot of room out there to grow with this stuff?
I do, Anthony, and I agree. Maybe 10%, and I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One is there's a lot of pressure for the investment that it takes to do this in the right way. So that's completely understandable, right? Digital identity and all that isn't the only thing that these folks have to spend money on. And then the other thing is, there are a ton of obstacles and constraints that are preventing even the folks that are willing to invest the money, make it a priority, and all of that. So if you eliminate all that kind of stuff, there's still a number of constraints that are preventing people, beyond that 10% uptake for all of those boxes, right? And that ranges from, well, who's responsible for who's responsible for making sure the data is valid? Is that, for physicians, is that some sort of credentialing agency? For, nurses, is that some sort of different credentialing agency? For IT people, is that, just HR and for, that sort of thing. And then, when you begin to add, patients and systems and applications and things like that into the mix, the constraints are, well, who owns the patient's identity and what identity are they going to use? Are they going to use an identity I gave them, or are they going to bring their own identity? And so, you have different, people who think about that in different ways. And the federal, in the U.S., there's no federal identity for digital identity for healthcare. So each sort of, company or private organization has to come up with that on their own. And so there's just, one more thing, and before I get off of that, the different applications that they have to use and that in many cases are mandated by law. So think of an EHR system. Many of those systems don't plug easily into digital identity ecosystems. And so, I guess the point of all that is, I'll say it again, even those that want to be much better and are willing to invest in it still have a ton of obstacles to overcome. And therefore, I think that holds that percentage of healthcare companies that do a great job across all of it, holds that way down.
Yep.
And Wes, we've talked about this before, and you've said if you're trying to do too much at the beginning, you can really get stalled, right? You mentioned you just got to get started type thing.
Yeah, but I mean, what Randy's talking about is we hear it all the time. It's HR is responsible for our W-2 employees, our FTEs there. Well, who's responsible for your volunteers? Because they need to check email and have digital ID too. Well, we don't know. Well, what about your providers? Like in California and Washington, the providers can't be W-2 employees. Who takes care of them? Well, that's our CMO's office. So you've got nobody that has, here's the source of truth. Every capital resource that is going to be in this facility or in our IDN, we will find out about them from this source of information. And boy, just trying to get that agreed upon, it costs thousands of lives and millions of hours in meetings. So it's that. So you can start with that. Most systems, you can have multiple sources of truth. So you can start with that. But what you're alluding to, Anthony, is the conversations we've had where they go, okay, I have 300 applications and I have 6,000 job descriptions. So now I need to take these 6,000 job descriptions and decide how to apportion these applications and access inside of these applications to all of these job descriptions. And you just get wrapped around that job description axle. And then some of the times HR goes, yeah, I agree, we do have too many job descriptions. So let's rationalize those job descriptions. So this identity governance program that you want to get rolling gets stalled by the HR program that does need to strengthen 6,000 position codes down to 2,000. So you get wrapped around that axle. But we have some tools, Imprivata, not to make this a commercial for us, but we have some tools that actually take, especially with all of our one-sign customers, that take the data that you've been using. Hey, these 6,000 people, despite the roles that their job description has, you can tell me their names, and I can tell you the applications that they've been using. And you can tell me like 6 or 7 ICU nurses, and I can tell you these are the applications that the ICU nurse uses. So now we can build a role for ICU nurse. And that's, you take it from the data to the description. Ooh, that's a good phrase. Data to the
I like that.
position description, rather than starting with the description. But yeah, you can't boil the ocean. We go in when Imprivata does an IDG project, we go in and say, look, here's 5 applications. Your 5 primary applications. Of course, your clinical application, usually Exchange Online, Office 365, some kind of ERP system, Loss and Workday, something like that, and then whatever else they decide. And these are the 5 we're going to do, and get you up and running and get you some value, and so that you can then prove to your CFO, to your CMO, to your CMIO, look, if you let me run it this way in this automated fashion, we can do this well.
I want to talk, we don't have too much time left, but I want to talk about the Gartner paper. I want to get your thoughts, each of you, on the takeaways that you brought from that paper, and sort of what you'd like the audience to know about anything that's in there. Randy, do you have any thoughts on that paper?
Yeah, I would say one of the things that I really like is this idea that you want to take a platform-based approach. And because you'll never, there'll never be the one silver bullet or the one thing to rule them all or anything like that, right? So if you take a platform-based approach to this, you're going to get, you're going to get the flexibility that you need without too much deviation. And so if I think about that and I apply it to Microsoft and Imprivata, since Wes and I are on the phone here, so that's what our organizations have done together, right, through a partnership, is take this platform-based approach where Microsoft has a broad identity sort of ecosystem there that applies to a bunch of different industries and use cases. And, there's a lot of applications and services that are already built into that thing. And then those on top of that are flexible to use for different use cases. And then, Imprivata has a tool set that plugs into that identity ecosystem and then makes it more applicable to very specific workflows and applications and other things for healthcare provider organizations. And so when you take that platform-based approach, you get that underlying ecosystem that more or less works together natively and can create a unified identity, unified digital identity, and then has the hooks, if you will, both sort of out of the box as well as extendable connections to then plug that into the rest of your ecosystem. Contrast that to the way that many folks tried to do this in the past, and that is they bought sort of the best of breed tool for each individual thing. And what happened was now the integration of all those tools is actually as hard, or maybe even in some cases harder, than solving my actual problem, which was managing the digital identity and giving people the access they need and preventing access to stuff they didn't need, and those kinds of things. And so I like this idea of a platform-based approach, that was sort of, I think, if not explicit, certainly implied by the Gartner paper.
Wes, your thoughts on the paper?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what Randy said. And the one line that I really liked out of the paper, and it's a trivial one, I admit that, so I'll get to something less trivial. But in the paper, it says, there's a little asterisk. It says, Imprivata is the only one of these companies that focuses in healthcare. And that's true. There's a lot of horizontal players in this market, and what Randy said about The Microsoft platform plus the Imprivata platform gives healthcare that complete digital identity framework, now a platform because we've added products to it, that our healthcare consumers need. Because, back to quote the HISAC, one of their recommended best practices is use a unified system to manage your IAM needs. And that integration that we have with Microsoft and the other products that we have in our platform give us that unified system that Randy's talking about. But really, from the paper, I just like Barry just stomping his foot, double emphasizing, ringing the bell, pulling the string, whatever phrase you want to say, that says, look, you can't do digital transformation without a decent IGA system in place. I mean, that is the foot stomper coming out of that paper for me. That is it.
All right, as the last thing, I want to get this in because I'm curious. Wes, you have a question for Randy.
Yeah. But not really germane to the subject that we're talking now, so that's probably
even better.
Randy a bit,
even better.
Let's Randy, your reaction just kind of around, you just initial, I don't need anything in depth. This SolarWinds thing, man, I think it's, I think it's pretty damn bad.
Yeah. That was a pretty strong statement, but that still might be an understatement, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what I would say here is the cobbler has no shoes, right? I mean, right. Here we are, as IT professionals and practitioners, we're trying to do the right thing for the organizations we support and all those kinds of things. And yet we're not necessarily paying attention to our own house, if you will, right. And so, SolarWinds is a tool that's meant to help IT professionals, ensure the availability and reliability and all that of their systems. Yep. So that, nurses aren't without the information they need, doctors aren't without the apps that they need, so on and so forth. And yet at the same time, we have to be just as diligent with those, our own applications and our own services that as we are with the ones that we support on behalf of, our customers, if you will. And so, I think that's really the moral of that story, right? Is just because it's an IT system doesn't mean that it's not just as important to ensure security, privacy, compliance, and all of those kinds of things. And maybe even more, because in the case of SolarWinds, that system likely had some privileged access to things, right? So that it could do, update routers or, roll out configurations to switches or servers or whatever. And so maybe it even had more access. And so therefore it needs even more. So, I'm going to not pick on SolarWinds here. I'm going to take this back to Microsoft. So if you have Azure, make sure that, you reduce the number of, admins that you have for your Azure subscription. Please put two-factor authentication on those admin accounts in Azure, on and on and on, right? So this isn't a SolarWinds thing. This is our IT systems need to be, just as perhaps more attention to them from a security, privacy, compliance, that sort of thing, than end user applications.
Yeah,
so.
I agree with you, Randy. It's not a SolarWinds thing. It's not a vendor kind of thing. It's a like you always said, that the cobbler's kids have no shoes. We've got to get some shoes for the boys and girls, and it was FireEye before SolarWinds, and and it goes the HISAC paper too. It's got to be an identity and access management system across the entire ecosystem. Like you said, Randy, I'm sure there was some administrative accounts that these vendors' products, let's say that, were using, but because they were administrative accounts, people may not have been watching them the way that they could have been because they are administrative accounts or they're system accounts, and it's those ones that have the power that we have to be wary of.
Yep.
Sorry.
Wow. All right. Excellent. We covered a lot of ground here. Cobblers,
you didn't give
plumbing.
me a chance to ask. You didn't give me a chance to ask.
Go ahead, Randy.
Question.
You're right.
Come on now.
Go ahead. Go ahead, please.
You can't give Wes the ability to try to stump me and then not give me the same opportunity.
He did throw you a curveball, so go ahead.
Yeah.
So Wes, I broke in because I'm, super interested in your thoughts on this, right? So if we think about where you and I came from up through, the healthcare IT world and what we used to do and what we were responsible for and all that, and I contrast that to what's going on now around digital transformation. So this idea that I've got to run a patient portal that does scheduling. In other words, I've got to be a consumer-focused technology organization now. I didn't used to have to do that as an IT department, right? I only focused on my employees. I was an enterprise IT department, not consumer-focused. And so, I guess my question for you is, as a former CTO and CIO and leader of healthcare IT, are IT departments embracing that change to now be responsible for consumer technology? And are they adapting their organizational structure and their people that they're hiring and all that in order to be able to do that and be as good as an Amazon or as good as you pick your consumer, product organization at engaging their customers with technology? Are IT departments, doing a good job at that, or do they even recognize that they have to change to be able to do that? Big recognition that they have to change. Maybe not necessarily to be able to do that. And second, are they embracing that? Health IT, and Randy, we've been saying this, there's 10 pounds of work and you got a 5-pound bag. And so you've always got more work than what you have capacity to do the work. So while they understand, we are going to have to be as good as Amazon, as good as, like you said, choose your consumer. We just don't have the bandwidth to do it. And not only are the IT departments recognizing that, the other C-level folks are recognizing that. And what I'm seeing more often than not is I hate to say it, but a carve out. And it may not necessarily be a carve out, and oftentimes it's an addition to the IT department that really is. They take people from Expedia and they take people from Amazon and they take people from Microsoft and say, look, these people that have been the traditional IT people, they are going to continue being the traditional IT people. But we need somebody who's consumer focused, that these traditional IT people actually support those consumer focused people, where the consumer focused people can actually focus on the consumer and not have to worry about the IT back end. That's what I'm seeing more than anything in those medium to large shops and some medium to smaller IT shops. All I'm seeing is plates full, sacks full, whatever you want to use, and here's some more stuff to put on top of it. And that's going to inevitably fail, which is going to lead to consolidation, which is going to lead to monopolistic behavior, blah, blah, blah. I had to bring that up because of the 60 Minutes Sutter thing that came out this last weekend, having been there myself.
All right, listen.
It makes sense, Wes, and I think we see the same thing, right? So whether they call it a chief digital office or it's a new organization they built under marketing and that sort of thing, and that's where a lot of the growth is in digital transformation versus like you said, IT is still doing a lot of what IT has always done. It's good to hear you're seeing the same thing.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, I agree with you, Wes. If that makes you feel good, just in case.
if I can just take that with me throughout the rest of the day, Anthony, that
You
it
may.
warms my heart.
You may. All right. Very good. I'm sure people have other things to do today, so we're going to let them go. Regarding continuing education, you could use the final slide in this deck. You'll get an email when the on-demand recording is ready for viewing of this educational and comedic hour we've spent together. If you want to sponsor an event with us, you can reach out to Nancy Wilcox. You go to our website to register for upcoming webinars. And with that, I want to thank our panelists. This was a wonderful and fun discussion, Randy Nale and Wes Wright. I want to thank Imprivata for sponsoring, and I want to thank you, our attendees, for joining. So with that, everybody have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Yeah,